and let us all do we can to build a better future.
All right, I'm going to move on, and this is just, this we're getting into Orwell and 1984 stuff here. So there is an alternative search engine known as DuckDuckGo. And what they have been known for is that they don't track, they're supposedly you're not tracking you online, so you don't have a lot of data collection, so that you're just minding your own business one day, you look up something like, silverware, and then all of a sudden you're getting ads in all of your feeds for Oneida or something like that.
Okay.
And I've had this happen. It's just utterly bizarre. You're looking up something, you look up one thing, and it's following you all over the internet. And DuckDuckGo has had recently an ad campaign where they are talking about how people are getting creeped out by being followed by ads after doing the search, and how DuckDuckGo doesn't track your data. And so they've kind of positioned themselves as this anti-tech company, an anti-cult tech company. But guess what happened yesterday? Gabriel Weinberg, who's the head of DuckDuckGo, put out a tweet. Like so many others, I am sickened by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the gigantic humanitarian crisis it continues to create. Stand with Ukraine. At DuckDuckGo, we've been rolling out search updates that downrank sites associated with Russian disinformation. In addition, they are also placing news modules and information boxes at the top of search results to highlight quality information for rapidly unfolding topics. Okay. Now, Gabriel and I are in agreement. I am sickened about what has happened.
I think we all agree.
Yeah, I am absolutely sickened by what has happened with the invasion of Ukraine. I realize that we have allies and friends of the show who disagree with me and disagree with us on that issue. And guess what? That's what we can do in a free society. We can actually disagree. All right. Now, I do understand why Russia is upset. And I do think that, that poking leads to provoking. And I believe that Russia has been provoked. That does not excuse what Russia has done here. However, it very much disturbs me that you have a search engine that is poising itself as protecting your privacy, respecting your rights as an independent individual, as a free agent to search for information without being tracked. It bothers me that this so-called anti-tech company has decided that they're going to roll out search updates that will downrank sites associated with Russian disinformation. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying, look, search engines have to look at site quality. They have to have some kind of criteria when they're ranking the sites. I agree with that. But there's disinformation all over the place. We're not seeing them talking about disinformation, war-related disinformation in general. We're not even saying, NATO disinformation. They're saying Russian disinformation, and that they are automatically at this point calling out information that I suppose either comes from Russia or that has a pro-Russian bias as being disinformation. It may not be. And this is extremely disturbing. And what's disturbing is this. I am actually ideologically aligned with Gabriel Weinberg on this particular issue. But there's a larger principle here of power. Who is in power here? Who has the power? We already know what Google does. And I would remind you that Google also happens to be, the owner of YouTube. And we know how that operates. And now we have a very popular alternative search engine that is also deciding that it knows better than you how to determine what is a quality site and what isn't. And that is being based on an ideological position. And this may seem like an open and shut case for many of you, but think about what happens when it comes to other issues. We've already seen the debacle that has happened this past week with whole news networks being taken down.
Yep.
And so this is what happens when you have people in power who have that kind of power. We don't have 5 million search engines. When I got online back in the very early 90s, there were actually a bunch of them. There was Magellan, there was Alta Vista, there was Yahoo, there was Lycos. There were a bunch of these search engines out there, and yeah, many of them went by the wayside after Google became the dominant player.
Yeah,
and we don't have that many good search engines anymore, and we know that there's an ideological bias to these search engines, so they're not going to be as helpful as they might have been. Now, I'm going to ask another question here. Why is this happening right now? Well, it could be that everybody's hopping on the same bandwagon. I've never seen so much yellow and blue in my life, except when I was, I think, when I was in junior high, and those were our school colors. All right?
And even then.
But here's the thing. On the 23rd of February, the New York Times, and they had their journalist who specializes in disinformation and misinformation, wrote an article about DuckDuckGo, and noticing that, as the headline says, fed up with Google, conspiracy theorists turn to DuckDuckGo. Now, I'm beginning to wonder, was this some kind of pressure on DuckDuckGo to say, oh, we don't want to be associated with all the conspiracy theorists? Now, again, I have spoken out against conspiracy theories. I, in fact, did a couple of shows on one of my other shows, Talk Gnosis, and then a crossover show with Hard Lens Media, where we talked about various conspiracy theories and how they were bad, and that conspiracy, coming up with conspiracy theories is not legitimate activism. But at this time, I have to wonder if DuckDuckGo's leadership has become sensitive to this kind of criticism, and perhaps are doing backflips to try and make it clear that, no, we're not associated with those kind of people. And at this point, anybody who has a counter narrative to what's going on is automatically, in some cases, being associated with those kind of people.
I also just want to really quickly shout out to E. Heller in the chat, who says the EU included the suppression of Russian-based search results as part of their sanctions. So it could also be from that as well.
I also wanted to acknowledge something here too, folks. Look, what happened to RT America, a lot of good people lost their jobs and livelihood. And the thing is, look, every media outlet does have its bias and perspective. But when you start calling for the need of censorship, you're putting everything on the chopping block, even things you respect. Now, Hard Lens Media first, I'm glad the Hill is no longer suspended. I want to acknowledge that. Hill's no longer suspended. But again, we should all be worried about this. And it's here to think, especially for the CEO for DuckDuckGo. You're calling to silence any kind of Russian sources. All right, misinformation. Okay, whatever. But the thing is, let's remember that there's been a lot of misinformation from Western media. Take, for example, the 13 soldiers who told that Russian warship to go F itself. And they heroically died? Question mark, question mark. Oh, wait, they're still alive. Or the ghost of Kiev, a fighter pilot that took down 6 Russian jets. That was fake. Well, and that was a ripoff of Ghost of Tsushima. So, I mean, come on.
And backing off the current crisis, it was a couple of months ago that I reported on how the New York Times perpetuated an urban legend, what it basically was, the murder of Kitty Genovese, which contributed to the notion of the bystander theory, where people will not respond to somebody who is being injured or who is in distress if other bystanders don't do so as well. And it took decades for the New York Times to come out and state that their story was wrong, and that they knew the story was wrong back in the day, but they never bothered to clarify it until it became a part of a real foundation of what people believed about modern psychology, and that people will not help people who are in distress, which, of course, turned out to be wrong. So if you want to pull away from everybody getting upset right now, we can point to other issues where the media did not do its job. And again, if the guy at DuckDuckGo had just basically said, look, we've got rapidly changing stories here, we're going to be on top of it to prevent the spread of disinformation, well, that might have been one thing, because a search engine does have to weed through search results. That is the way they're supposed to work. But to come out and to say explicitly Russian, that concerns me.
I also want to add on this too. Look, no one wants this war at all. No. And every minute it continues on. I can't stress this out to all of the people who are cheerleading on the sidelines. As soon as the first nuke is dropped, that's it. And by the way, we will never recover. I don't want to hear talk about we'll recover, we'll build. As we have said on the show, we have mined and digged out plenty of the fossil fuels already. If we are to have World War III and people are so gung-ho about it, and censorship and censor that, we will never get to this level again. When that happens, it's all gone. It's over. We'll be living in stagnation, and we will no longer be able to achieve the great wonders that we have built so far. So for all those people who are still cheerleading this war on, or say they'll fight this, or say we should censor this, as soon as the first nuke is dropped, it's over. So, on behalf of everyone, here's hoping that cooler heads do prevail, that the diplomacy wins, that somehow we get back to respecting the First Amendment, free speech, and independent media. Because every minute this thing continues to go on, we are marching towards our own extinction, or dare I say it, our own self-stagnation that we will never recover from.
And I also just want to jump in on the whole press angle of this, because this is why freedom of the press is so important, why I think we have to reformulate it to be more expansive or define things within it. Because we know now that governments, when given the opportunity, will do everything in their power to censor. And how do they do that today? Well, Lenny's talked before, you can't really easily do that on radio or television. What you do is you go through a private company like Google, and then you say, you hold something against them. Hey, we'll break you apart if you don't do this. Hey, we'll give you a fine if you don't take down this channel or that channel or the other channel. And, we've talked a lot before that a lot of the pressure, social media companies do not inherently have, and again, when this all started, they were against doing any of this to start with because they were like, it's too expensive to do. This is a push that is done by people in political power. This is a force that is done by people that are in political power. And what are they effectively doing? They're working around the First Amendment by the technicality that an open space in all other words and all other terms is open and public is technically private because it's owned by a private corporation, even though in all sense of the words and the thoughts and the way that press is even described, it's public. Anyone can use it. Anyone can access it. It's the new public square, the largest public square we've ever built, and we continue to treat it and act like it's anything but, so that a few people in office can control this narrative as much as they can. Other people, like New York Times, obviously, all these old establishment papers have a personal incentive to do as much as they can to take out people on new media because we're their competition.